So we're going to start in a minute. I know there might be a few people late. So we're going to mention to the people at the front desk that our first stop after we start here will be up in the homeroom, and you'll just follow us up there. So first let me introduce you to people who know a lot more about the building beyond the architecture than me. Mark Cassettari, who runs the physical operation here, the physical plant, and his associate Miguel, who also works in there. So they know secrets that I don't even have any idea about. So this is not only a tour for you from my heart, my experience, but it's a tour for me from their hearts that I haven't heard about, even though we worked together for 20 years. Mark and I worked together for 20 years. And Miguel and I, well, actually, we didn't work together. Yes, we did. We did work together, but not officially, right?
Yeah, we've been working.
Yeah. So let me just start with something that some of you may not know, because some of you are not residents, right? Okay. So why this building was placed here? Let's start with that, because it really is historic. So you may not know this, but back in the 20s, and actually way back up into the 40s, this whole area was segregated. So if you were a person of color, right, if you were not Caucasian, you could not live within 2 miles of the University of California. Now, there were students of various backgrounds from around the world who actually went to school here, but they couldn't live anywhere within 2 miles of the university. That was called segregation. It was right here. So people think of segregation, Mississippi, the South, some of the many unpleasant parts of our history in this country. So to make a long story very short, this was the the first interracial co-educational living center west of New York City in the United States. Why? And why they chose Berkeley was because at the time there was the largest number of students from other countries on the West Coast. The first major I-House started in New York City, which some of you already know. This was the second. They chose Berkeley because of the number of students. There are 4,000 students and scholars to this day. In those days, this had the largest number. It was something like 200 or 300 students from other countries. Why did they put it here? The man, some of you know, this is the Edmonds Cafe. Harry Edmonds himself had the idea, let's put International House with all of its people from around the world living together, men and women, right in the middle of the bigotry. He basically said, let us punch bigotry right in the nose. That's what Harry Edmonds said. Now, most people on this campus to this day think that the cafe, it used to be called the coffee shop, and we'll talk about its architecture in a little while, they think that's where I-House residents eat. Sure, they have wine, they have beer, they have snacks, coffee, tea, light snacks. But in the old days, the whole purpose of it was to let people come into the community and mix with the students of I-House to get to know them as people. That's why that was there. And even to this day, there are a lot of people from the campus who will come in there just to, it's a nice place to have coffee, and then they meet people from other countries. Sometimes they've never heard of the country. So that's the point of that place, which has its own architectural history, which we'll talk about in a second. I want to talk a little bit about the ramp, which you may want to weigh in on this. From 1930, there were no disabled ramps. People, even though this was a very progressive institution, people from all over the world, all colors, all religions, no religions, everybody could live here, right? But there wasn't access for people who were in wheelchairs. And so at some point, before I started my time at I-House in 1988, they built an elevator right here. There was an elevator right here, and it went down there. You remember that elevator?
I do.
And that would be for people in a wheelchair, right? So that they could come up and have access. That was not there in the beginning. People didn't even recognize people who were in wheelchairs. So what happened? The elevator started to break down. And so we had to make a decision. We need to build a ramp. We can't keep relying on an elevator that breaks down and people are stuck in the elevator, right? So we made the plan, and it started to get known on the campus. And there was a whole protest against this. Do you think you know why?
Was there a tree there?
Huh?
Was there a tree there?
Yes, you are good. There was a tree. There was a tree there. There's a whole tree lobby on the campus, a tree lobby. Nobody should ever cut down a tree. Now, I don't even know if you know this.
Yeah, I remember it.
When did we cut the tree down?
Was it 1995?
I'm talking about what time?
Oh, what time?
Yeah, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Because people were calling me, threatening me, don't you dare cut that tree down. This is nature. How dare you treat nature this way? Forgetting about a human being who had wanted to have the dignity to access the building, right? So we cut the tree down, and we were ready with an answer. We replanted the tree. It is still right next to the music building. Did you know this?
I heard something about it.
Now you know.
Now I know for sure. I can confirm it.
So we built our first ramp here. The second ramp was built, I think it was, there was a second ramp built in Hans's time, I think.
No.
No?
No, this was the ramp that went in 95 was a switchback ramp. So it came up and it went back and forth. And at the time it was compliant with ADA.
Yeah.
Since then, it was not compliant. So we wanted to make sure that there was a lot, the sidewalks were uneven. There were the ADA people, there was an additional ramp that went into the street. You can see the white line with the diagonals. People had to ride their wheelchairs in the street to get to the bus stop. It was really unsafe. So we thought if we have to tackle doing a ramp, we were going to do a completely new front entry to the I-House, but a lot of work went into trying. The biggest thing of all was the brick staircase. When we go to the Hall of History and you can see what the original staircase looked like, it was that staircase up until a few years ago when this was done. But a lot of thought from our House Committee, which is a subcommittee off of the Board of Directors, went in to make sure that we replaced the brick because it was a significant part of the entry of the
Right.
house.
So, and then this was done during Sean, the current executive director, was done during this time, actually in the last 3 or 4 years. So there was access coming from here. So I felt it was important for you to understand that part of the history because it has to do with treating people decently, really, and showing respect, trying to accommodate. You know, it is possible to find common ground. Not always, but that's the whole point of this place. All right, so why this style? Now, obviously, many of you know it shows a Spanish influence, right? Why Spanish influence? Because when the Spanish came to the Americas and to California, which was part of Mexico at one time, they brought their architecture. But what wasn't well known was that Spanish architecture was also influenced by Muslim architecture in North Africa. So if you go to Spain, how many of you have been to Spain? Okay, you probably will recognize balconies like that. You will recognize tiles like that. That is what some people, so it's, you know, in the literature they refer to this architecture as Spanish colonial. The Spanish who were colonists, they came as colonists basically, right? So it's really kind of, Spanish colonial is really a misnomer. It reflects Spain, but it doesn't reflect Spanish-Moorish influence. And an architecture student here at I-House, some of you may know her, Krishna, she did some research on it, and actually some of the Moorish architecture has its roots in Byzantine architecture going back to pre-Muslim time, before the 6th and 7th century. So it has a mix. It's kind of symbolic that it has a Christian influence, a Muslim influence, a Spanish influence. And so when you see these tiles, and you know there are other balconies on the other side, right? All right, now before we go up to the homeroom, any questions so far? Ready? Okay, let's go.
Go up and unlock the door.
Yeah.
You're probably the most knowledgeable architecture of anyone here.
Okay. Thank you. Go. Okay. So as many of you know, this is called the homeroom, and it's been called that, and it's been named after, actually it's named after a couple who got married here. The Golubs got married here, I think, in the 60s. So why do I start here? Look at the ceiling. I discovered way back, probably in the mid-90s, that this ceiling is a replica of a ceiling in the cathedral, one of the major cathedrals in Toledo, Spain. So if you ever go to Toledo, Spain, go to the cathedral and you will see a ceiling. You could take a picture of this to, to check me out. Do a fact check of Joe Lurie, right? Did you know that one, Mark?
I did not.
There you go. All right, so the homeroom, and of course the other features that you're going to see throughout the building, the chandeliers, the ceilings, all of these kinds of things reflect a Spanish-Moorish quality, which has, in some cases, Byzantine roots, right? Now, when I first came here, I noticed these beautiful pieces of furniture there. Look at that gorgeous chest behind Mark right there. Over here. Okay. So this is an amazing story, among hundreds of amazing stories. When Harry Edmonds agreed with the architect of the time, whose name was George Kelham, he was the university architect for the whole campus, and he was the architect for this particular building. They decided that they were going to, what should I say about this? They had an architecture that had the Spanish-Moorish feeling, but they didn't have the furnishings. So Mr. Edmonds had a niece, I forget what her name was, and she was a designer. This was back in the late 20s, right? Now, you all know that the first major international house was in New York, completely different architecture than this. And there was a doctor for the King of Spain, and his name was Dr. Del Amo. Even to this day, if you Google it, there's a Del Amo Foundation in Los Angeles that gives donations to various things. So Dr. Del Amo was very rich, and he was so impressed with the idea of International House in New York, and he knew that they were going to build one here in Berkeley, that he said to to Harry Edmonds' niece, I think it was, why don't you go to Spain and live in an international house at the University of Madrid, which was built in 1928, I think, because of the inspiration of the International House of New York. So he said to his niece, why don't you go live there at the International House of Madrid at the university? Any of you from Madrid by any chance? Okay, you've been to Madrid, any of you? Okay, so she lived there for a year, and she studied the design, the furnishings. You see this chair? This was inspired by the furnishings she saw. Now, whether she brought it back, I can't tell you that. I will show you something she brought back from Spain. These furnishings here were inspired by what she saw in Spain. I'm going to show you a picture now. It has nothing to do with this. Of furnishings from Spain. It just kind of, the first time I saw this, it kind of blew my mind. Quickly see. Unfortunately, I should have blown this up, but you see this chair? Can you see that chair? Now, when I first got here, there were chairs that looked like this before they were upholstered. That chair is a Spanish chair, and there were chairs like this here. See it? Can you all see it? Now, this one you're going to have to pass around, but it looks like it's a chest like these two, but it wasn't taken here. The picture was taken in Spain. Just pass that around and you'll see the influence. Okay. Chairs, the chests. And I know this one was, Mark, do you know if any work was done on this, or this is pretty much the original that was here?
Funny you should ask.
This one was redone to a certain extent.
Yeah, that chair right there was brought to the shop. We had 3 guys working in the maintenance department. We each had our own forte. We could all do everything, but when anything that had to do with woodworking came in, it usually came to me. They brought in that chair. Somebody had snapped off.
This one or this one? This one.
Had snapped off the center ornament at the top, right there. And it was flat. at the bottom between the two round pieces. And they asked me, can you just sand it down, and, because it was missing. Can you just sand it down and stain it to match so that we can put it back in the home? And I took the original wood left over from some of the original beds that were in the I-House. They were Spanish cedar. And I took an old bed rail, cut a piece of wood out, and I made the match.
Thank you.
Looking at this one on this chair, I made the matching piece and just put it in place and then refinished it to match.
Saif.
And so that chair is now complete, but that's not the original little piece. That's the piece that I made to match this chair.
See that? Who knew? I didn't know this story. Sorry. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why I like to start in this room so that you see this. Now, if you ever go to Madrid, at least nowadays, there is no longer an international house at the University of Madrid. Why? Because it was destroyed during the Spanish Civil War. So I will often say to Spanish students, think about this. You know where the mail room is, right? The old mail room. And in the hall, there's a kind of a leather chest just before you walk in. Maybe later on we'll show it to you. I do know that Harry Edmund's niece brought that chest back. So it gives me great pleasure to say to the Spanish students in particular, promise me, put your hand on this chest and promise me that if one day you become extremely wealthy, you will rebuild the International House at the University of Madrid. But that is the story that Dr. Del Amo built because he was inspired by I-House New York. He built the one in Madrid. Harry Edmund sends his niece to live there. She is inspired, and some of the other furnishings we're going to see in a minute basically come, either she brought them here or it was so inspired. Now, obviously, you see tiles all over I-House. This is also obviously a Spanish-Moorish influence as well. All right, any questions before we proceed? Okay, next, let's go to the Great Hall ceiling. Is that okay? Is it coming now?
It's just for the wind.
Oh, okay. Isn't that something?
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't even think about these furnishings until I found the picture.
I did what I could. I mean, if you're just looking, it looks the same.
Salut, ça va.
If you're nitpicking, you can see on that perfection.
Wait, don't go anywhere. No, stay. By the way, the wood doors, also an influence. This is also an influence. Wood doors were a big influence. So I want to talk about the ceiling here. So, I mean, what do you think, who inspired this furniture here? Look at that. That furniture was inspired by what was going on in the late 20s. You see the furniture there? That's, you can't buy that in a store today, here anyway, right? Now look at this ceiling here. This ceiling was repainted a couple of times, right?
Was touched up
Touched up.
because we had water leaks.
We had water leaks. Now what years was it touched up?
Oh, Lord, 20 years ago.
20 years ago. So what you don't know is that from 1943 to 1946, International House basically didn't exist. It was occupied by the Navy. So during the Second World War, the residents from International House moved into the fraternities and sororities. And International House was, ironically, an institution against war, basically was occupied by 900 Navy men, 3 people to a room, 3. If you think rooms for 2 people is small, think about 3 people. Well, the Navy covered this up. I've read this in the archives. And after I-House reopened in 1946, they had to tear down what covered this up, all right? But this is typical of ceilings that you will see in Spain. Now, here's a mind blower. Many of you, I know, have probably heard about the fact that a lot of marriages have taken place here at I-House. People have met here at I-House, fallen in love very frequently across cultures, right? I'm not saying they all worked out, but from my experience, most of them worked out, all right? So there was a couple, an Indian gentleman And he met a white woman from Southern California. They both lived here in the 1950s, and they fell in love, and they got married in the Great Hall. Someday, maybe one of you is going to get married in the Great Hall. We don't know. Maybe. They got married in the Great Hall. Later on, they, through a variety of circumstances, became relatively wealthy, and they had a passion for Indian art. Now, one of the buildings that George Kelham, the architect of this building, was an architect for in San Francisco was the San Francisco Library, which became the Asian Art Museum. Okay? Has anybody been to the Asian Art Museum? Okay. Maybe you've been to this room. At the Asian Art Museum, there's a room devoted to Hindu and Indian art. Indian art, mostly Hindu art. I think there might be some Muslim art there as well. At any rate, they made the collection, they donated the room. Would you believe that the ceiling in that room is the same as this one? So I'm saying to you, if you've never been to the Asian Art Museum, go. If you've already been, you probably didn't notice. And then you'll know that the people who got married here across cultures under this ceiling, somehow it was like, you know, kind of a spiritual thing. The architect for this building built that building, even though it was meant for a library, but somehow in one of the rooms was this ceiling. Okay? So that's one of the reasons that, you know, when I walk into this hall, I often look up and I remember, because I knew this couple. Unfortunately, Raj Desai passed away this past year. But I knew them. They would often come here, think about the time they got married. And can you imagine just that they remembered this and they donated a room at the Asian Art Museum that had the same ceiling? Before, they didn't make the ceiling there, it was there, connected to George Kelham, the architect. Okay. That chest we'll take a look at later. So let's wander down to the Hall of History and stop briefly at the cafe. Any questions yet? By the way, these, you see these, how would you refer to this? How would you describe arches? These arches, the way the arches are shaped here at I-House, also a reflection of the Spanish-Moorish influence. Now, the other thing is, throughout California, there are missions, Spanish missions. Have any of you been to the Spanish missions? Okay, so that's why they call it Spanish colonial, because when the Spanish came here, they came as colonists. And those Spanish missions really were converting Native Americans, native indigenous people in California, parts of Mexico. If you go to those Spanish missions today, you will see architecture just like this. Domes, and we'll talk about the domes a little bit later, which is very typical of Spanish-Moorish architecture. Okay, let's go down to the coffee shop briefly. And these tiles, this bench, everything here. There you go. Yes, I want you to become wealthy and build it. Promise me.
I will.
Okay.
I still need to get the money, but
You don't see hand-carved moldings like this anymore either.
Yeah.
The scarabs.
Yeah, I want you to, this is something I learned about relatively recently. Does anybody know what this is?
Egyptian?
Well, all right, but what does it represent?
Beetle?
Oh, you think it's a beetle. As I've been told, and maybe there are others that are more obvious, a seashell. Back of a seashell. So in many parts of Spain, there are seashells in the architecture, which I'm going to show you in the dining room later, and huge. And the seashells, some people felt, and certainly many people refer to it as a symbol of renewal, resurrection. How many of you know about the Camino in Spain? The Camino where people walk to reach the end of the Camino, where there's a very famous...
yes, Santiago de Compostela.
Voilà, right? Okay. But on that Camino, there are many seashells like this, which represent renewal, resurrection. So they have they became parts of the architectural features of Spanish-Moorish architecture throughout California and even in parts of Mexico. Okay, let's take a look here. Look at this. I mean, this piece is original. Yeah. Yeah. And I should say to you, you know the chandeliers in the Great Hall that we looked at, those chandeliers? Same chandeliers in the dining room, right? Same thing, very typical. So this cafe, this was renovated in the last 3 years. This is not what it looked like in 1930. It's not even what it looked like during my time from 1988 to 2007. It had much more of a feeling of, how would you describe it?
It was very 70s. It was a lot of, I mean, there was a lot of dark wood paneling. There was a mirror that ran the entire length of one side to try to make it appear bigger than it really was. The ceilings were furred down so it felt enclosed more. If you want to know what it looked like back in the 30s when it was a soda fountain, you can just poke your head inside the door and look on the wall. There is a picture.
Actually, there's a better picture in the Hall of History. Yeah. Oh, yeah, this one here. Yeah, the same picture. See that? It's like a soda fountain. They didn't serve alcohol in those days. Yeah, let me show you.
Over International House in the 40s.
Right.
They built that. We were trying to see about doing some work to it, but because we didn't have any plans.
Okay.
This was the first project
Right.
I worked on when I got here.
Yeah. So here, come over here, I want to show you. This is what the original coffee shop, they called it a coffee shop, looked like. See the difference? And they called it a coffee shop. They began to call it a cafe in 1976 when I-House decided they were going to serve wine and beer, which was a big revolution at the time. Big revolution. That's when it became the cafe. But you see how different it was. Even look at the lamps there. This was back in the 1930s. Here are the chandeliers from the dining room, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But you notice that the dining room had only one dining room. The dining room that you know has an extra dining room, which was not part of the original building, which I'll tell you about in a little while. Let's see. Now, you know where how many of you have been in the I-House library? Okay. That used to be 2 rooms. Even though I-House was revolutionary in having men and women live in the same building, I mean, when I was a college student in the 60s and 70s, dorms were separated, men and women. They were not integrated. So 1930, men and women in the same building, right? But in fairness, you should know that the women lived on the 3rd and 4th floor and could not visit the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th floors. That was for men. Until the rebels of the 60s, including my wife, stole the doors between the men and women's lounge, which is now the library, where men and women can study together. That's the origin. That was once a men's... Did you know that?
Yes.
You knew that.
Yes.
Did you know my wife was involved with that terrible revolt?
I will not confirm or deny.
They stole the wall, the door between the men and women's section. And my predecessor, a lovely man, his name was Sheridan Warwick, he knew where the door was, but he said, it's time for a change. So you see, even that sense of coeducation changed over time. Now, I will tell you that when I was working here, there were only male and female bathrooms, right? All the bathrooms were male and female. Even though on the campus there were more unisex, the campus was ahead of us, but there was a great sensitivity here. A lot of students from around the world they weren't comfortable with going into a bathroom where men and women were together. Even to this day, there's a lot of discussion about this. But I believe today there are neutral bathrooms, right?
We have single facility ADA, we call them ADA bathrooms, or gender neutral bathrooms, but ADA people have priority.
Right.
So if we have an ADA resident here, we can program the card, that card for that particular resident only to get into that bathroom.
Right.
Nobody else can get in, and there are others on the floors that can get access to.
So here's what the auditorium that we're going to go into in a second looked like originally. You see these arches? when we go in there, you'll see these arches are no longer there. And the reason for it, I'll explain when we go in there.
The great hole in the middle picture at the top. Look at the woodwork that's not there anymore on the wall.
On this wall?
Yep.
Where is it, Mark? I can't see it.
I believe that's the great hall, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the Great Hall, right.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, that's when it was already
All right.
done. There's another picture.
All right, so basically,
Yeah, this one right here.
oh yeah, see this?
This right here is this wall.
This wall was here. That was taken down probably for earthquake reasons? Yeah.
Somewhere is.
So this, the auditorium in 1980 was renovated because it was the most sensitive area. It was judged then to be vulnerable during an earthquake. So what you see here in the original auditorium, these arches are no longer there. We're going to show you in a second, but I want to show you one other picture. Hold on. This was I-House being built in 1928-29, obviously.
You can see what the building looked like when it opened at the top.
Right.
3 arches, which are now the 3 windows.
Yeah. Right. So let me just take you a peek here. Okay, so these are I-House residents, and that's the front of I-House. Notice the arches. In those days, you could walk right into the Great Hall. Now, of course, you have security issues. Those were the arches, right? But they retained the arches here. So you still see this Spanish-influenced arch, Spanish-Moorish influenced arch right there? There it is. And it was like that in the front of I-House in the early days, and you would walk right into the Great Hall. Now let me show you what happened in the auditorium, which a lot of people have no idea about. Everybody in? So, in 1980, because of the danger, you see the original design up in the windows, the arches there, right? But before then, as you saw in the pictures, you'd have the arch, the curved arch. Look what they did. This was earthquake bracing. This happened in 1980. Okay? And before, this is, by the way, just before I need to go back to the ceiling in the Great Hall for a second. This is a typical ceiling in Spain. See that? Typical ceiling, can you all see it? Typical ceiling in Spain, right? Okay, so the main thing I wanted to tell you about here was not only about the earthquakes, but obviously the chandeliers are original, right, Mark? All right, okay. Okay. Now, this is amazing. Obviously, this is a gorgeous ceiling, right? And I just assumed that was, again, part of the Spanish-Moorish tradition, right? And then, all of a sudden, I came across this picture of a ceiling that looks exactly like it. See that? This is not the I-House Auditorium ceiling. You can all see it, right? This blew my mind when I saw this. Okay. I was studying architectural features, and I came across this story about in Segovia. Has anybody been to Segovia? You've been to Segovia. You know there's a synagogue there. There used to be a synagogue in Segovia. Okay. So next time you go to Segovia, you will see that there was a 12th century synagogue in Segovia that had this ceiling. This ceiling. Because in those days, who were the architects? The Muslims of Spain. A Jewish synagogue, a Muslim ceiling just like this. And then after the Inquisition, obviously, then you had Jews, and then Muslims were also asked to leave, right? So I'm talking about, Mark, you didn't know about this, that I discovered this 12th century synagogue in Segovia, Spain, that has exactly the same ceiling, but built by Muslim architects, okay? And then now there are, yeah, I think it's like a museum now. You should check this for me. But what for me is, obviously it was used for different religions at different times, right? The Jews in the 12th century, later on, et cetera, et cetera. But for me, even though it was used for different things, for me it was a symbol of, here you have a ceiling that reflects both a Jewish reality in Spain, a Moorish architectural reality, a Spanish design, and it's right here. Right here. I had no idea, absolutely no idea about this. I should give that to you at some point. Yeah, Spanish city unearths Jewish past, Segovia. Unbelievable. And it's this ceiling. You want to borrow that article? Or should I email it to you? If you want it. Okay, okay, I got it, okay. So that's basically, and then again, they did leave the windows. It's interesting, Mark, that they decided to give earthquake bracing to each of these areas, but they felt that the windows were strong enough.
Yeah, the windows were strong enough. The 6 banners were replaced about 15 years ago. They had, the old banners were really quite thick and were shaped round at the bottom, and they were referred to as the tongues because they looked like a dog's tongue.
Right.
So they were redesigned and put in here, and they actually hold an important purpose for the room. They are acoustical. They absorb sound, along with the tiles on the walls and the back walls, so that you won't get that hollow sound when you're in here talking.
Right. And I think these were also put up to help with the sound, the acoustics. That's right.
They serve 2 purposes.
Yeah.
One, we had an artist design them, and the House Committee picked the color scheme, and then they're acoustical batting inside to absorb sound.
And then, of course, you see the reflection of the design of the tiles on the walls as well. I mean, it really is a gorgeous, gorgeous room. I don't know what that was used for, but when I got here, there was that room in there, the Slusser room. And Mr. Slusser, some of you see the names of people, you don't know who they were. He was the attorney for the Bechtel Corporation and was a big donor to International House. So they called it the Slusser room. There's even a scholarship named after him to this day, that old room. But I don't know what that looked like in the old days.
I don't either. I don't remember seeing any pictures.
Yeah. How many of you have been to Jerusalem? Okay, so if you go to Jerusalem, one of the most significant features is the YMCA in Jerusalem. It has the dome. The dome. That dome, which is very common. I don't know to what extent you see domes like this in Spain.
I've seen them.
You've seen them. Okay. All right. I'm not lying. Okay. And you see domes like this in many of the missions. By the way, there's a very famous mission in San Francisco in the mission, the San Francisco mission. Have you been there already, Carl?
The main one?
Sorry?
The main one?
Yeah, the main one.
Close to Dolores Park?
Yeah, in Dolores Park. And it has certain characteristics, I believe, as I recall. It's been a long time since I've been there. But there are these missions all up and down California, in Carmel. Let me show you a picture of one in Carmel. This is pass this around. You'll see a dome with the kind of arches there. And if you visit, there's a mission in San Rafael. There's missions all the way down in San Diego. So if you have a chance, you really should go in, and you'll be amazed at the features that you see in these Spanish missions that echo the kind of architecture that you are experiencing here. Now, the YMCA in Jerusalem is an interfaith institution, right? So if you ever visit it, it has Muslim features, it has Christian features, it has Jewish features in the building, And so many students have said to me, why, during my time, why can't we go up and visit the dome? Mark?
Because the insurance company would have our heads. We used to, back in the early 90s, once a year, usually right after fall move-in would host a resident visit to the tower. We came later on, it became clear that the ladder that you had to use to get up there, which was embedded in a concrete pillar and goes up about 20 feet, was non-compliant. It was just real thin metal rungs. We've since had it replaced and the hatch replaced, so there's a hatch in the ceiling. It's not an easy access to get to. And as I was sharing with somebody just outside the door here, the other thing that a lot of people don't know is the north side bathroom stack, exhaust stack, vents into the dome and out. So when you do go up there, you get a great view, but the smell is not real pleasant. So.
Yeah, and basically we experimented for a while, and Mark and his colleagues would sometimes take 2 or 3 residents up there just, for the experience. But then I had a headache. The other 575 to 600 students would come to why can't we go?
Right.
And then I didn't want to drive him crazy, so it was a careful balance. All right, so what I'd like to do now, any questions about this room for the moment? Anybody? You're okay? So what I want to do is, can we get into the dining room going up the far staircase? Or would you prefer to go this way?
It doesn't matter.
Let's go that way. I want you to all to see that chest. Let's go this way, thank you.
I looked it up on Google.
Which?
It was turned into a small convent.
Yeah.
I have visited it.
So it turned into a convent, and what is it today? A museum or what?
It's
still a convent?
I think it's not used anymore as a convent.
Not used.
It is. Actually, I remember trying to get some tickets.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is still a convent, but you can visit
Right.
the main room.
Oh, Paige, there she is. How are you, Paige? What was the name of that song, that gorgeous song you sang?
Read all about it.
It's called Read All About It?
Yes.
Oh my God, it was fantastic.
Oh, amazing. Are you doing the tour right now?
Yeah, we're doing the tour now.
That's awesome. Maybe I'll stop by.
Yeah, sure. We're doing towards the end now, so I'm going to show them something about that leather chest, and then we're going to show them something in the dining room if you're free to join. All right. Okay. That's great. So here it is. This is what I said. I know for a fact that Harry Edmonds' niece brought this back from Spain. I know that. During my time, we used to put wood in it, and we would use it in the fireplace. And I have said to the Spanish students, you could say it to them all, put your hand on this and promise me that if you become wealthy one day, you will rebuild the International House of Madrid. That was inspired by Dr. Del Amo. He gave the money for it. All of the furnishings, the original furnishings, came because Harry Edmonds' niece experienced. Look at this right there. It's all inspired by that period, the Spanish-Moorish period. Okay? So now I want to show you something historic about the dining room. Let's take a look. All the tiles here, and this is pretty good, Mark, that this has lasted close to 100 years now. If you take, this is all Spanish-Moorish influence as well.
Do they ever have to repaint the tiles, or are they all like?
I don't know, Mark, have they ever repainted the tiles? And he's been here for 35 years,
No,
Mark.
those are original.
Like these ones here
No, these are all original.
from the 1930s.
Yeah, now I should tell you, pause for a second.
Some of these are, and these are against the wall, so they don't see a lot of foot traffic. And the same with the risers. We don't get a lot of foot traffic. You're not walking on them, so they last.
Yeah. So this is, look at the tiles for the fountain there. You will see fountains like that in Spain, right?
Yeah.
The sunken patio, is that not common in Spain? The sunken, look at how it's below, it's sunken. Yes?
Yeah, especially in the south of Spain, which is...
There you go, the south of Spain, which had a large Moorish influence. There you see the arches again, even the lamps, all of that. It dates back to the very, very beginning. Now, during my time, Mark, am I right that there were 4 olive trees in the... Yeah.
There were up until about 5-6 years ago.
Right, and they were planted as a symbol of peace. That was the whole point of it. Now, I don't know when I don't think they were planted in the very beginning in 1930.
No, they weren't. They were added later on,
Right.
and we brought an arborist in, and they were dead or dying.
Right.
They didn't produce olives,
Right.
and that was part of the reason why they were removed, to create more space for residents.
There you go. Okay, now I want to show you 2 or 3 little anecdotes about the dining room that probably most of you didn't realize. Come. Okay. I'm going to wait till everybody's here. Okay. Now, you see, earlier I gave you an example of the seashell. Remember, it wasn't the best example. Look at that. That is a seashell. That is on the Camino, everywhere on the Camino, and it represents renewal, resurrection. Now, whether they meant that when they put it here, I don't think so, because I-House was supposed to be an interfaith institution, etc. All faiths, all religions, no religions, everybody. But there it is, and you'll see another one over there, right under the exit sign.
This is the original dining room.
This is the original dining room. If you remember the picture. Right. No. No. Yep. This is what happened. This was, in the beginning, I-House was built for 460 residents. Everybody had a single room. That's why they had only this dining room, because they could accommodate 460 students here, and maybe they had dining outside as well. So as you know, the I-House was occupied by the Navy from 1943 to 1946. And I should tell you, it's not an architectural question, it's a philosophical issue. That International House was one of the very few institutions on the West Coast that protested the Japanese-American internment. It protested it. And the director at the time made sure that many of the residents of Japanese American heritage would go back east, where there was less sensitivity about the Japanese in the war, to live at international houses, at the International House of Chicago, International House of New York. I mean, this is really an important part of what does this place really stand for? It stands for humanity. It stands for all of us and our common bond as human beings. So, after the war, there was this huge influx of students from around the world who wanted to come to Berkeley to get a degree here, to meet other people, et cetera, as well as Americans who had fought in the war, and there was something called the GI Bill. There was a bill that enabled American soldiers to go to college, basically, I believe it was without tuition. So, a building that was built for 460 people, all of a sudden, what's the origin of doubling up rooms at I-House? They needed to accommodate up to 600 people at the time. So that's why about a third of the rooms, maybe a little more now, are doubled up to accommodate more people after the Second World War. And now, actually, if you think about it, there still is a housing crisis for residents in Berkeley, right? There's a housing crisis. So what happened was, when they had more students, they increased the occupancy from 460 to 600. They had to build another dining room. That's the reason that is there. That dining room was built in the late 40s. It was renovated later. It was built in the late 40s. And you'll notice this is really kind of an interesting cultural thing that I experienced. At night, this room tends to be more dark, somber than that room. Am I right? Okay. So during my time, I don't know if it's still true. You'll have to observe and see if it's true. They tried to, make it was just kind of an add-on in 1946. And during my time, we did one renovation, and then later on, in another executive director's time, there was a second renovation. You see how they tried to make the chandelier a little bit more consistent with the original chandelier, the spirit of it.
2015, when we did the kitchen renovation.
Right.
We renovated
Yeah. I should say, the kitchen renovation, which cost a lot of money, I think it was the kitchen renovation, part of the dining room. Notice that it's called the Eric and Wendy Schmidt dining room, right? Who is Eric Schmidt? He was once the head of Google, very wealthy man. He met Wendy Schmidt here. Why did they decide to make sure that $3 million came for the renovation of this dining room, that dining room, the whole kitchen, which needed renovation? She was on the dining committee as a student. So she had that's the reason for it. He basically, Eric Schmidt said, here's $1 million, you go out and raise $1 million, match it, and we'll give you another $1 million. So that's why it's called the Eric and Wendy Schmidt Dining Commons. But this dining room itself has, you know, when I came here, this is interesting. This was, I know this is shocking, this was the smoking area. This was the smoking area, and even in those days, they felt, you know, there were plenty of students who didn't like smoke, were offended by it. And then we went through, you know, a mini revolution, and then that's why you can't smoke here. That's why you cannot smoke here. So you can imagine, you know, when you think about it, you all eat here. Hopefully you appreciate the fact that we have a brilliant cook who tries to satisfy so many different definitions of what spicy means, right? I mean, she's got a great, and she invites you, as I understand it, she invites you to submit recipes, right? Up until she came, they never had goat. And a lot of the African students, where goat is very common, said, well, we miss goat. That's why you're having goat now, because of the input of the residents. You know, I celebrate her. She's done magnificent things trying to celebrate as many cuisines as possible. So in my day, this area was the smoking area. And also, this was part of the renovation, if I recall, Mark, to make a little stage here so that there could be performances done.
Renovation, they replaced the screen that comes down for Sunday night movies. Used to have Sunday night movies.
Right.
And they put a small stage for the New Year celebration, the Lunar New Year, and the different theme dinners that they have. They have people come.
Right, and so we started to talk about the importance of the ramps, which weren't there in 1930, right? Look at this, even to this spirit, that they made a ramp here. There's a ramp here, so that people okay, high page.
I'm proud to say that in my tenure, we are 100% ADA compliant, and we are 100% sprinkler and fire compliant. So
There you go, there you go.
we're the first building on campus to come into seismic compliance with campus's new seismic rules that they had in 2020. We did a seismic upgrade again that brought, this was the first building under the new guidelines that received the okay, good job from campus. That
Right.
brought it up to compliance. So
Right.
there was a list of buildings as long as my arm. We were the first
Yeah.
one to get it done.
Yeah. So when you think about this building is almost 100 years old, there's been a lot of people, dedicated people, members of the board of directors, volunteers, staff members like Mark and his colleagues and Miguel, who make sure that this building is here for generations to come, because it is a precious institution. So let me just kind of end on a cross-cultural note. During my time, you'll have to tell me if this is true. Generally speaking, during my time, we know that many students like to eat with people from many countries. We know that. But we also know that many students like to also connect with their own cultures. So they like to, you know, speak Spanish or speak Twi or whatever at times to just connect to who I am. So what we started to notice during my time was that this dining room, which when it gets dark is definitely more subdued in color than this one. This is much brighter. And many of us started to notice that students, generally speaking, who were born and raised in Asia, tended to predominate in this dining room at night. And Europeans, where you brought up many Europeans, well, what, dinner, you know, candlelight, subdued lighting. I don't know, are you used to subdued lighting and still? Were you raised with subdued lighting or really bright lighting?
No, bright light.
You were raised with bright, okay. How about you? Bright lighting? Really bright. Anybody who comes from parts of Europe where, you know, it's kind of romantic, the subdued lighting. There you
Over
go.
30.
Anybody over 30. So this may not be true today. But anyway, so we started to notice this. And people said, well, yeah, there is a tendency. I don't want to exaggerate. There's a tendency for many of the students born and raised in Asia to be sitting in this room at night. Many of the students from European backgrounds here. And of course, other parts of the world, depending on how you were raised you raised with a lot of light when you were eating or not? But even if you go to many Asian restaurants in the Bay Area today, and they cater primarily to people of Asian descent, they're extremely bright. So we had discussions about this. We tried to figure out what's going on. And basically, the Asian students that tended to eat here would say, we like to see our food. It's important for us to look at it, how it's presented. Are you nodding? You see, I'm not making this up, right? Did you notice that there is a...
But I didn't notice the differences.
Well,
But I do.
You do. You prefer. It's
It's
important to look at the food. Really important to look at the food. So I'm inviting you in concluding this little architectural tour to think about how do people respond to the building and where they sit, where they eat, how they eat. I mean, I remember one American student came to my office. He said, I can't, I really love all the students here, but I don't want to eat with Japanese anymore. I said, why? He said, well, the Japanese, when they have soup, they go like this. Yes? Okay, not only the Japanese, right? Not only the Japanese. So he'd never heard, right? And so he said, oh, it's disgusting. I said, you mean to tell me you are going to cut off 80 million plus people in the rest of your life because you don't like that sound, right? Like in some countries, if you don't belch after a meal, you're being rude because belching means that you appreciated the food. You're not being rude, right? So I said to him, why don't you try? Give it a chance. You don't want to eliminate more than 80 million people for the rest of your life because of the sounded so disgusting to you. 3 months later, there he was with his Japanese friends. So that's the beauty, and that's why I think it's important that all of you who are living here or visiting from time to time really do have a chance to connect in the dining room. Breaking bread together is really a symbolic thing, where you actually have a time to humanize each other. And I'm sure that each of you have your own stories about what you've discovered about people from other parts of the world that you'd never even thought of before, and maybe even, gee, I could like this person, and never even considered it. Anyway, let me stop there. Yes, please.
I just want to quickly jump onto that. International House Berkeley is the only international house right now out of the original 4 that has a communal dining space. This is the central hub for this house, for our residents to come together and socialize, and it sets us apart from everybody else. When you talk to residents that have been here, that have lived here, that continue to live here, one of the things they say was, it was in the dining hall.
Yeah, that's true.
Just meeting people, sitting with people, talking with people. This is what sets I-House Berkeley apart from all the others at this point, even to this day.
Yeah.
It was brought up in a board of directors meeting. So it really is an integral part of this building and who we are.
And a lot of people, don't even realize, some people on campus nowadays do know that I think they can get a meal ticket to come here. They can make a meal pass. And that's kind of an entree. It was the same spirit as the cafe. Why was the cafe, the coffee shop, put on Piedmont Avenue? Come on in. We're not awful people. In the beginning, this was such an unusual place. I don't think you know this story. In the beginning, this was written about by a former resident from 1930-32. In the beginning, it was so unusual. People who looked different, had different ways of wearing clothing. There were tour buses from San Francisco that came to Berkeley just to see all of these weird people at I-House, right? And the people at I-House, Berkeley students have a reputation of being very bright and scholarly. They had their faults like everybody else. They would go out when the tour buses came. Are you ready for this? Sit there. They would go out when the tour buses came, and this is what they would do. And they would kind of mock the tourists and say, hey, we're not monkeys. We know what you're thinking. We're not monkeys. And so that's why I think this is such a precious place, and I appreciate the fact that you take the time to learn a little bit about the building that ensconces you. Okay?
If anybody is interested, we can go back down to the Hall of History. I really do recommend you take the time to read about each of the frames and the stories and things, because it really is a good representation of who we are and who we've been over the years, how the house was built, how it came to pass. It's a remarkable story. That's why I've been here as long as I have. I love this place.
35 years.
I love the mission of the house, and it's been an honor for me to take care of this building. It really has. So,
thank you, Mark.
right.
Thank you, Miguel. Thank you, guys. Enjoy your dinner tonight.
So you said this part is kind of unique to Berkeley I-House?
Yes.
Other, like I-House
if you
in
went to
New York
I-House
or
New
Chicago,
York, they don't have a
this kind
communal dining space.
How do they eat? Like how they?
They do have one, but it's not. I'll tell you, it's not as big as this. And the I-House of New York. The reason for that is that if you're a student at any institution of higher learning in New York, Juilliard, NYU, Columbia, it's not affiliated formally with Columbia. Anybody who is affiliated with an institution of higher learning or doing an internship, let's say, with a company, can live at the International House in New York. So they didn't feel they could require students who were all over the city, some of the colleges in the Bronx that they were going to. That's when there is a dining room, but it's not required.
And from what I understand, it's nothing like what we have.
Yes,
here.
that's true.
We're completely unique in that respect.
Right.
And we don't require you to eat here. We encourage it because this really is the hub of the house.
Yeah. And I should tell you, how many of you have been to Paris? Have you ever been to the Cité Universitaire? Okay, so there's a place in Paris called the Cité Universitaire. And the fourth I-House was built at the Cité Universitaire. It's called la Maison Internationale. But it's not a residence. It's a place where there's a library, a swimming pool, and a dining room that caters to 37 mini I-Houses. So there's an I-House for Cuba, there's an I-House for the United States, there's an I-House for Japan. You could look up the Cité Universitaire in Paris, and there are 37 mini I-Houses, like the one for Cuba, for example. One quarter of the students are Cuban, the rest are from all over the world. Same thing for Japan. One quarter of Japanese, the rest from all over the world. So all of them could go to the main chateau, which was actually architecturally based on a French chateau. Did you know that, Carl?
No, I didn't know.
Yeah. I think it's built and designed after Chateau Fontainebleau. Je crois. You'll fact check me, right?
I'll see.
Okay. Anyway, so that's something you should do. And also another I-House that was built with Rockefeller money, 1951, the International House of Tokyo. Did you know about that one? All right. So the International House of anybody from Japan here? Nope. Okay.
I've been there.
You've been to the International House of Tokyo?
Yeah, I work in Japan.
Wow. Okay, so that was built in 1951. It was a bridge builder after this very difficult, painful war. And what's different about that I-House is that it's exclusively for research scholars. So about a third of the residents there are research scholars from Japan, and the other 2/3 are research scholars from all over the world. But they have programs, they have people from all over the world making presentations, beautiful Japanese gardens there. So if you go to Japan, definitely go to the International House of Tokyo. The other house I would recommend, I mean, there are others, in London, the International Student House of London, which doesn't have a Rockefeller connection, but does have support from the Queen, the monarchy, did have support from the monarchy. And I'll make the last comment that the most international houses per capita, you know what country? Australia. There are 6 small international houses in Australia. Anybody from Australia here? Sydney, Melbourne, Darwin, forget that they don't all come to mind, but 6. Why? Because there was a tremendous, in the 60s and 70s, there was a tremendous migration of people from other countries to Australia. And you know what happens when people from other countries come in. You're seeing it happen in this country right now. Oh, they're different. They're replacing us. So they built the international houses in response to that, to try to humanize people, new immigrants to Australia. I'm not making a comment about what's going on now, except for the broad parallel. But the whole point is, if you're going to have new people coming into your country, the way to integrate them is to live together, to spend time together. And that's why 6 of them in Australia, and that's the reason for it. Anyway, thank you for coming today. It's a blessing to have you at I-House. The reason my wife and I come back here frequently is because all of you, when we meet you in various years and have a meal with you, just kind of give us hope for the future.